Yeah, welcome to the Delivery Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We run this session here every Friday, 11 o'clock European Standard Time, Central European Standard Time, I should say. Allow you to the audience to ask questions all about data vaults, all about cloud computing, MVP computing. Everything data-driven is fine. Don't ask me any live questions. I'm not good at that. And then if you receive multiple questions, then you can use any channel here. You can use a chat here to raise a live questions you want. I mean, I know this from the training. Just ask questions, it's fine. You can use the Q&A in the client here. You can also just raise your hand if you want and get voice, or use the form, which I will show you after today's session, how you can essentially type in your questions in some form, upload some pictures if you want, or from a whiteboard, maybe some diagram, team picture, whatever it works. Everything you upload, though, might end up on this channel here and might end up on YouTube or any other channel, right? And if you receive multiple questions, I would essentially cherry pick those. And it's time box. So it's really 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes roughly for answering your questions, essentially. Now, and if you don't ask questions, we will talk about this beast here. And stuff is running here. So it's heating, well, not nice, but yeah. Sorry. All right. We received a question. Let me just share it with you guys. That's one of the real-time questions. So the question essentially, the original question was essentially this one here: what additional steps are there in real-time loading patterns on top of the batch loading? Well, I assume you mean by that when you decide to go real-time, that's okay. Essentially, you when you talk about the real-time pattern, what's needed, what you wouldn't do in, let's say, in batch loading. That's how I interpret the question essentially. And to answer this, let me show you the data vault architecture that we use in real-time systems. I need to move some stuff here. All right. So on the bottom part, you see essentially the typical data vault architecture, how we deal with batch data essentially. You get data from some data sources, maybe from your CM system, from MDM system, anything you want. Load that in the hybrid architecture. In the book, we use the relational staging area, but that's from our perspective nowadays outdated. And to the point that we consider a pure relational staging area as an anti-pattern actually. So we typically use a data lake for staging purposes. And that's what we teach and preach in the trainings. And I would say that most clients these days have a data lake for staging purposes. There might be a few of our clients where they use a relational staging area. Typically for historical reasons, because it was the way we came in or the way it was there already. All right. And so we ingest the data from the sources in batches into the data lake. The data might come every night via CDC in near real-time batches, whatever. And then we process it into the raw data vault by some SQL engine like Impala, Polybase, Apache Drill, Snowflake SQL, and so on, or via some external tables that are applied on the data lake essentially. So we make it relational essentially, and then we break it apart into hub-string satellites essentially. Apply the business rules on top, and then derive the information mart schema, the star schema, Snowflake schema, flat white structures, and then push that into the dashboarding tool or applications or whatever you want to do with it essentially. And there's more than these applications, right? So you could use it for data cleansing of the operation systems again. You could use it for business process automation and so on. Now, when we receive data in real time, we have some publisher. So somebody will send these messages to an initial, let's say, a WebSocket or some port where you receive these messages. For example, a WebSocket. And then, sorry, still recovering. So we receive these messages. We didn't depict the port here. And then you have the message queue that picks up the initial message as it comes in. This message is then processed by what we call a raw data vault loader. The raw data vault loader's purpose is to deal with the raw data. Okay. So first of all, what we're doing is we push the message. Really, that's the first step. The first step is to push the message into the raw data vault. For that purpose, the raw data vault loader will break the message into the individual elements of the incoming message. So as we always say in the training, all data, all enterprise data, even your personal data, consists of three fundamental elements. That's the business keys, the relationships between business keys, and the descriptive data. So no matter what you're doing, that's in your data essentially. And we absorb this in Data Vault model, in the Data 2.0 model, by hubs, links, satellites. So we load the data. The purpose of the raw data loader is to break these messages into these individual elements and then load them into your target model in a raw data vault. So typically you get multiple streams here coming out of the raw data vault loader, and it will insert the records into the target model. It will also, either the raw data vault loader will do this, or your infrastructure is able to do that. Sometimes you can use you can configure that every message from the message queue will be stored in a data lake. So that's what I would use typically. If that's not possible, the raw data vault loader will deal with that and push every message as it is, as it arrives, as a JSON, XML, whatever. You push that message directly into a data lake. That's, however, is the secondary step. So for performance reasons, you really want to focus on, for latency reasons, you really want to focus on the message into the raw data vault, because that will be used in real time, right? The fork here is for the data scientists. So they can use essentially, if they don't want to deal with the real-time feed up here, if they just want to, let's say, use the data in some batches, for example, they can do that now on the data lake, given their tools and so on. Now, we want to, deal with the real data, with the real-time data in real time. Back then, like decades ago, they used triggers. I mean, Dan told me once, they used triggers to push the data forward, essentially into the business vault and so on. Problem is, you could use triggers in some scenarios on-premise database sometimes, but they are generally not available. You can't expect them to be available in cloud systems. So they might be there, might not be there. So the typical design is a bit different these days. So what we do is we push the message now forward. The raw data loader has done its job. It has dealt with the raw data essentially. So it pushes it to the next message queue. The next message, this message queue is the only purpose is to forward this original message as it arrived, right? Forward to the business vault processor. So again, the raw data loader will load the message into as a fork as is, but also forward the same message to the message queue. And then, if you want to prioritize this, raw data vault first, forward the message to the message queue second, and then the third job, if you can't do this in parallel, right, is a fork on the data lake. So this message, which then arrives in the message queue, is forwarded to the business vault processor, and the purpose of the business vault processor is to apply those business rules which should be applied in real time, and also make some decisions. So, for example, you might have the case that you receive some sensor data, and you have a sensor ID, and you want to know which car maker has built the sensor into the car, for example. You have this data. It's somewhere in your CM system. It has been loaded in the past because, I mean, seriously, you set up before you sell the sensor, you have set up the vendor in the CM system, and you have most probably set up the sensor record for the item that you sell in your ERP system as well. So this data is already in the raw data vault, right? When the real-time data comes in, when the feeds come in, essentially. So we can use that to enrich now the real-time feed. We have all the information of the sensor, who purchased it. Maybe the car maker will tell you the model it will go into, because maybe you have customized it or certified it for this purpose, right? And so on. So you have a lot of more data about the sensor than you have in the real-time feed. So we use a business vault processor, for example, to enrich it with additional data from the raw data vault. The model of the car, for example, the car maker, and so on, the driver, and so on, right? All this data we essentially attach to the real-time feed now. And those loaders here, the processor, that's your Python code, your Java code, whatever it is, or C# code, and so on. Or you could also use pre-processed data from the business vault, cleans data, and so on, right? All this is available for your business vault processor to apply. And it can also wrangle the data in real time, process the data, cleans it, filter it, and then maybe write some results back into the business vault. It's not raw data anymore, right? That was the purpose of the raw data loader, but it's processed data. So it will write into a table in the business vault, because it might be interesting for other processes, non-real-time, other real-time processes, batch data, whatever, batch processes, to use the same results as well. And then And then typically what happens is you have two options now. You can either send some message, maybe a different message. So the business vault processor will also take the message and now produce the message for the dashboard or for the dashboards or for the apps, and then send this message via the message topic to all the subscribers here. And that's why we use a message topic here, right? And the problem is, and then if that works, you could essentially put your dashboard on top of the message and just, for example, display the results essentially in real time. That works sometimes. The problem is, what if the information payload becomes too large for some systems? Because they typically have some limit of how large the message can become. So depending on the target, what we do also is we often inform the dashboard or the application that something happened. All right. So we just say, you know what, your line chart should be updated, or your presentation here in this mobile app is outdated now. And then the application and that works especially if you custom develop your dashboards, like really in C# or Node.js or whatever. When you in React or whatever, when you build your the dashboard or the app by yourself, then you receive this notification message now from this message topic, and then the application knows what to do. It has to query the most recent results now for the line chart or whatever, for the traffic lights, retrieve the most recent records now from an information mart. In the best case here, everything is virtualized, so that information mart will show the real-time data, right? The real-time perspective from the raw data here and from the business vault processor here. Even if there's a table involved, if it's loaded by the business vault processor in real time, it will show the data in real time in information mart. And that's typically just a virtual view on top of the real-time enabled data vault ANDs, the real-time enabled business vault ANDs. That information mart will show you the most recent data. And then it can essentially get the data from the information mart and display the results based on the notification, essentially, if the payload is bigger, right? For example, yeah, I mean, think about this when you, sorry, when you have line charts we produce, what we typically do is we send, first of all, we limit the size of the line chart to, let's say, I don't know, 240 data points, 240 days or seconds actually. And then what we do next is we pull the full line chart, all 240 data points every second from this information mart, because then we can correct the line charts to some extent for late arriving messages. That's a trick. So yeah, that's how we do it. It's another story. It's also a good question, but hey, it's up to you, because I'm coming to the end for here. How do we deal with this when we have massive amount of data here, but the requirement for a pit table or bridge table in real time, right? There's an information delivery class that we provide, where we talk about that. How do we do pit tables and bridge tables in real time? How we maintain them essentially in real time? It's also a good question for the Data Vault Friday. So just ask the question, right? Yeah. So that's the architecture. That's how we deal with this, and we'll also discuss that in the upcoming article on the Azure blog, which comes mid-January. That's when the article is ready. And yeah, that's the idea. All right, cool. So if you have a question like this, anything, right? And we still have some questions on the pipeline, so they will come up sooner or later. Use the form here when you go for https://sfr.ee/dvfriday. Yeah, use that form to submit your questions. There's also other webinars on our topics that are of relevance for us. For example, Warescape or DBT, for example. We have sessions here. When you go to this link, scalefree.to/webinars, you will find additional webinars on other topics by our experts at Scalefree, where we discuss essentially certain topics. We are always data vault based though, but or mostly data vault based, I would say, but for tools essentially. That's the idea. All right, cool. Thanks for joining, guys. I hope you enjoyed today, and we'll see us. Yeah, there's one more session before Christmas, so we'll see us essentially next week, next Friday, same time. Cool. Thanks for joining. See you guys. Thanks.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.